All right, well, we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome, everybody, to the Insectary Plants webinar. My name is Tia Silvasi, and I'm the Florida-friendly landscaping agent for UF IFAS Extension in Orange County. So Orange County is a huge county. We have 1.3 million people, and we also extend our reach to anything else in Central Florida or even Florida. The presentation today about insectary plants, it can really be done anywhere. The plants that I mentioned specifically are Florida plants. So we have about a half an hour talk today, and then I'll have time for asking questions at the end. So a little bit of housekeeping as we get started. We'd like to keep your microphone on mute so we avoid disturbances in the class. And then you can use the chat box to text everyone and say hello or make comments and ask questions. But I'll be just checking the chat box at the end. It's hard for me to see it at the same time as the webinar. And then with the link for the Zoom webinar, you should have also received a link to my Qualtrics survey. If you could be so kind and do that after the webinar, I would really appreciate that. So here's a little bit about me. And my name is Tia Silvasi, and I'm the Florida-friendly extension agent for Orange County with UF IFAS Extension. And I grew up in a farm in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And my grandma and grandpa, they were doing organic farming before organic was even organic. And I just loved it as a kid. And then as I grew up, I had various jobs at plant nurseries and arboretums, and went on to get my bachelor's degree at UCF in environmental science and botany. And then I got my master's degree in tropical plant and soil science at the University of Hawaii on the island of Oahu. I've worked with the University of Florida in both research and extension for the past 2 years now, and it fits right along with, my passions. And I love plants and nature and growing food, and I like to share alternative approaches to growing things, which the insectary plants theme definitely hits on. So if you're not familiar with the Florida Friendly Landscaping Program, it's based on 9 principles that when you apply these to your landscape, it helps you choose environmentally friendly practices. For example, principle 1, right plant, right place. This is said to be the overarching principle, and when you choose like Florida specific plants and plant them if they like sun or shade or a lot of water or like it dry, then that will avoid having a lot of problems on your plants, due to too much water or lack of nutrients. So planting the right plant in the right place can help you save on your maintenance costs and just your time in having pest and disease problems. Principle number 2 is to water efficiently. And so our natural water resource in Florida, although they are abundant, they are very valuable, and a lot of water is wasted watering our lawns. So we like to encourage people to regularly check their irrigation systems. Right now, according to whatever water management district you're in, and here in St. John's Water Management District, we can water 2 times per week. So you want to follow your water management district watering restrictions. And also, you don't want to apply too much water at one time. So when we do water those 2 times a week with our automatic irrigation systems, we're targeting 1/2 inch to 3/4 inch of water per event. And you can measure that by just putting out some tuna cans and letting your irrigation system run and then measuring it just with a ruler. So Florida friendly principle number 3 is to fertilize appropriately. And every county has different fertilizer ordinances, or maybe your county might not have one. But here in Orange County, there is a kind of blackout period in the summer, starting on June 1st and going through September 30th. And that is a period where we experience a lot of heavy rain frequently. And so that's why that has been mandated, because we do not want to apply nitrogen and phosphorus fertilizers when we're going to get heavy rain, because it will end up in our water bodies and contribute to increased algae growth, you know, which is detrimental to our health and our environment and our recreation. So it's important that you know those ordinances in your area and follow them. Number 4 is to mulch, and having a nice layer of organic mulch. We recommend a 2 to 3 inch layer. That will help protect the soil and conserve water, saving water, and also release nutrients slowly over time. And so it's just a great practice to incorporate in any spot in your landscape. Now, principles number 5 and 6 are what we will be specifically addressing today in the Insectary Plants webinar. Number 5 is to attract wildlife like pollinators, butterflies, beneficial insects, and birds, bats, and bees, and, you know, maybe squirrels and deer, maybe. Number 6 is to manage yard pests. And using insectary plants attracts the beneficial insects that will help to manage your yard pests in an environmental way, you know, part of like an organic pest control or integrated pest control management system. And then number 7 is to recycle your yard waste. Keeping these in your yard helps to increase your nutrient content in your soils, and reduces that big truck having to come around and get all your leaves. So just put your leaves in your compost pile or around your landscape as mulch, and recycle those in your kitchen scraps in your compost bin. So number 8 is to reduce stormwater runoff. And so that rainfall that we do get, we want to try to keep that on our property and sink it into our turf grass and our landscape areas, rather than just having it go run down our concrete driveway and straight into the stormwater gutters. Number 9 is to protect the waterfront. And so along waterfronts, and everybody's property will affect the waterfront, you know, like I mentioned, the nitrogen and phosphorus runoff going into the water bodies. But we recommend at least a 10-foot buffer between the waterfront, where it's an area that you're not mowing or fertilizing, and that will help to keep extra organic matter and nutrients out of the waterfront. So there's a whole class that I do on Florida-friendly landscaping that goes into these more detailed. So, you know, keep posted if you want to attend that class. But today we're going to be focusing on insectary plants. So what are insectary plants? Well, they're part of an integrated pest control system. Organic pest control, you're attracting beneficial insects to prey and parasitize on the garden pests that you have. So insectary plants are grown to attract and feed and shelter the good bugs, and then the good bugs eat the bad bugs. They also provide pollen and nectar for bees and other pollinators. And pollination of your garden vegetables is an important thing for flowering plants like squashes and tomatoes and peppers. So let's first talk about beneficial insects. Now, I'm more of a plant nerd than a bug geek, but I've just listed a couple beneficial insects that you might be familiar with, such as the ladybugs and the hoverfly pictured in the bottom right, and the lacewing, the little green bug on the bottom. It's important that you learn how to identify the good bugs, and then when you see a bug, you don't just automatically kill it, because there are a lot of good bugs and they will help us. There's other beneficial insects, parasitic wasps, praying mantis, minute pirate bugs, and Swarovski mites that attack the bad mites. Just to get started, there's plenty more on top of that. And so the next step is to determine what pests do these beneficial insects eat. And so aphids, there are a lot of beneficial bugs that love to eat aphids. Ladybugs are, you know, one of the most popular ones, but the other ones too, like aphids. Caterpillars. So caterpillars, some of them are bad, like this bean leaf roller caterpillar here, but some caterpillars are good. Kind of unfortunately, the beneficial insects do attack the butterfly caterpillars too, because to them a caterpillar is kind of a caterpillar. But that's kind of just ecology out there. Pictured on the far right are the mealybugs, really magnified large so you can see them. Other pests include mites, scale, and thrips, just to mention a couple. These can all be controlled with biological pest control. So here's the two ways that these beneficial insects are working for us in our gardens. So on the right, you see a lacewing larvae, and it's preying on aphids. So it just grabs the aphid and it eats it. On the right-hand side is a picture of a parasitic wasp. And so this is laying eggs in the armyworm caterpillar, and it won't kill the caterpillar immediately, but the wasp larvae will eventually end up killing the caterpillar. So I'm not going to get too detailed into this today, but you can look on the Rodell Institute. If you just Google Rodell Institute insectary strip or insectary plants, you can get these lists from their website. And they're up in Pennsylvania, but a lot of the same pests and plants are available here in Florida. So this lists the insectary plant, you know, such as alyssum. And then what beneficial insects does it attract? Well, hoverflies. Now, if you have an aphids problem, you know, what one eats the aphid? So we have to go to the next chart they have. And so hoverflies here eat aphids, small caterpillars, and thrips. So if you have an aphid problem, you want to attract a hoverfly. And you know that the alyssum is one of the plants that attract the hoverflies. So if you're a commercial grower, you will want to match up the pest to the plant and the insect, you know, more precisely than if you're just a home gardener. You can have a variety of insectary plants, and they will be attracting a lot of different beneficial insects that will help your ecology in your yard thrive. So some basics on creating habitat for beneficial insects. You want a variety of flowering plants and plant them in groupings where the colors can be seen by the insects. You can include native plants and non-native plants. It's actually been shown by research that a combination of the two provides the most food for beneficial insects. And most of these flowers like to be planted in sun or part sun. And then you could also provide a water source for them. And you want to reduce or eliminate the pesticides that you're using in your yard. And if you do need to use pesticides, use a least toxic one and in a targeted area. So here's just some different types of insectary plants: herbs, annuals, perennials, native plants, shrubs, trees, palms, and grasses. I mean, it's pretty much all the plants, but what we want is plants with abundant flowers and sometimes specific types of flowers. Now, before I get started on that list, I just wanted to mention some of the plants that really do not provide a lot of wildlife value. For example, this bromeliad pictured on the right, or the philodendron planted on the bottom. These do not have a lot of flowers. They're mostly just pretty foliage. You can see the yellow croton too in the back of the philodendron. And since they don't have a lot of flowers, they don't provide a lot of nectar and pollen. They might still provide some habitat. But next I'll show you the plants that are really good. So herbs, if you're already planting edibles, consider adding some of these herbs to your garden and go ahead and let them bolt and flower. So let them put up their flower spike and flower. Pictured on the right is a dill flower that is kind of in an umbrella shape. And so there are lots of little baby flowers or florets inside of this flower. And they are really good for pollinators and the beneficial insects to be able to get the nectar and pollen, because the flowers are small and they're shallow, so easily drinkable, you know, from parasitic wasp and the beneficials. So onion is another one that you can let flower. You can let your cilantro flower and your dill flower, and basil is a great plant. The my parsley usually does not flower, but if it does, we can let it flower. Also, fennel is a great one. And this is just a list for starters. There are many more herbs that can be included. Next, we'll talk about annuals. And so a lot of Asteraceae family type of plants, like the asters shown here, the cosmos, the tickseed, the zinnia, sunflowers, marigolds, calendula. These are all really great for the beneficial insects, because those little ray flowers, I mean the little disc flowers centered in the very center of the flower, that's what provides a lot of food for the beneficial insects. Next, we're going to talk about perennials. And so perennial flowers are a great way to attract beneficial insects as well. And again, in the Asteraceae family, like the black-eyed Susan and the purple coneflower, they have large, beautiful flowers, lots of pollen and nectar, and other things with a lot of multi-flowers on them, like the butterfly bush, the lantana. Pentas are a great one, society garlic, and there's many more that could be listed too. So native plants, there are a ton of native plants, and I just included a couple of my favorites here. But native plants are important to incorporate in the landscape, because a lot of these native pollinators and beneficial insects co-evolved with the native plants. And so that's what they grew up, you know, eating the food. And so they're used to having those food sources. And so it's good to at least try to incorporate a couple native plants. And some of them are available at some common garden centers. I know I was in Lucas Nursery, and they did have this beach dune sunflower, the yellow flower, at the bottom, and they also had the gaillardia or blanket flower in the top right, and I think they had the Kunti cycad as well for native plants. So just some of them that I've listed here are the coreopsis, which is our state wildflower, and then blanket flower, blue mist flower, beach dune sunflower, and goldenrod. Those are all in the Asteraceae family. And then horse mint, that's in the mint family. Liatris milkweed, not only is it great for butterflies, but also for other beneficial insects. And red salvia, that one just grows in my garden and reseeds, and it's beautiful. So next we're gonna move on to shrubs. So, you know, usually you think about insectary plants as just little flowers here and there, but it can extend into your larger part of your landscape. If you have a wet spot, you might want to plant a button bush. And then all types of hollies. Pictured in the top is the Ilex glabra, or the gallberry. That has a lot of tiny little flowers that are loved by beneficial insects. Also, elderberry is also good for wet spots, pictured in the bottom. And it just has a huge flower inflorescence with hundreds of little flowers on. And then it turns into little purple berries, which are also beneficial for wildlife such as birds. The firebush is pictured on the right with those tubular orange flowers, and that's a favorite of hummingbirds. Also the Lionia and viburnums, you get a nice spring color from those viburnums. And then don't forget about trees. So a lot of trees also provide food for insectary, beneficial insects, like this red maple pictured here. Again, the Dahoon holly is one of the larger hollies, also a good plant. The redbud, for those of you who live north of Orlando, it's good for zone 9A and above. The sea grape, for those of you who are in coastal areas, they just have a beautiful little spike of flowers. And then again, you get the sea grapes that you can eat or let the birds have. And also magnolias. Insects love those flowers. So here is a picture of the saw palmetto. And I think this is an underutilized plant. It has all those flowers, and the bees and pollinators and beneficial insects love the saw palmetto. And so you can buy this at native plant nurseries. If you have one in your yard, then consider keeping it and letting it flower. Some people cut off the flower spikes of palms, but that's not necessary. If you let them flower and then you don't like the mess from the berries, you can cut them off after they flower and when they start to form those small little green berries. Also, the cabbage palm is a great one, and that's our state tree, even though it's a palm tree. And that gets real beautiful flowers, kind of like the saw palmetto. If you're in South Florida, maybe you can grow the coconut palm, or the royal palm is another tropical palm. And then for Central Florida and above, the jelly palm and the queen palm do well. So don't limit your insectary plants to just little annuals and perennials. Think about palms and trees and even grasses, like this pink molly grass here. Now, the grasses provide habitat for the beneficial insects to live, but they do not really provide the nectar and the pollen like the plants do. So it's recommended just to intersperse a couple grasses here and there to provide the beneficial insects a place to hide and maybe overwinter or go through their life cycle. If you guys could please keep your microphone on mute, that would be great. I just had a little disturbance. So moving on. So how do you put these plants in your garden? That's the next step. So one, you can plant them alongside of your garden. This is my vegetable garden in my backyard pictured here. So I have to have a deer fence because I'm out in the country and the deer love to eat my vegetables, especially the sweet potatoes and the peppers and the tomatoes and potatoes. But they do not, I found some of these insectary plants that the deer will not eat, which includes the red salvia, the pentas, lantana, they don't like to eat, society garlic, they don't eat those ones. So I just planted them in a strip outside of my garden, outside of the deer fence. You can also plant them in between your vegetables. And say you had a squash and then a marigold and then another squash. But I just have limited area that I have fenced off for the deer, so I wanted to maximize my vegetable production in that area. So you might have heard the term companion planting or intercropping or insectary strips. And they're all pretty much interchangeable when you're talking about home scale of planting insectary plants. When you get to commercial level, it is more technical exactly how they work it in. One row of flowers, one row of vegetables, another row of flowers, maybe a strip along the border. as long as you work in plenty of beneficial flowering plants, then you'll be sure to attract the insects that are good. So here's a really cool video I recommend you to watch on YouTube. It's by Dr. Eric Brennan out in Salinas, California, and they are growing organic lettuce and using insectary plants to control the aphids that eat the lettuce. So here is a picture of a hedgerow. So a hedgerow is a permanent planting of perennials, and they can even be shrubs. Most of this stuff looks like it's about 5 foot tall. And so that is a really good way to do it. Oh, I don't know how to go backslide, but that's a great video that you can watch on planting hedgerows and attracting beneficial insects to your garden. So just wrapping up here with the finishing touches for your beneficial plant garden. So as I mentioned at the beginning of the talk about some Florida-friendly landscaping practices, you want to be sure to do these as you plant your insectary plants. So that includes to irrigate efficiently using efficient sprinkler heads like the MP Hunter rotator, like pictured in the bottom. Fertilize responsibly, and a lot of these flowering plants do not require a lot of fertilizer. Putting a 2 to 3 inch layer of mulch down to keep the soil covered. Avoid using pesticides unless necessary. And then if you do have to use pesticides, don't spray them on your beneficial plants because they will kill all the insects, good and bad. And then maintain your garden, but not too neat, because that's where some of the beneficial insects will go to. You know, the butterflies will metamorphosize and go into their chrysalis. And so just having a couple twigs left out in the yard will provide them habitat to go through their life cycle. And then if something dies, don't worry, just add some new plants and constantly fill it in and try to have something flowering all year round. So a couple resources I wanted to share with you today are our University of Florida EDIS documents, which are just our electronic versions of publications. So the next two documents, the natural enemies and biological control, and the natural products for pests, are both EDIS documents. So you can just Google UF EDIS or just UF IFIS, either one, and then whatever you're looking for, biological control, beneficial insects, nectar plants. There's a whole list of nectar plants for bees and butterflies and other creatures. On the Solutions for Your Life, which is another UF website listed at the bottom. So there's just a ton of information out there. And today I just wanted to give you a brief introduction. So I hope I gave you some good ideas of insectary plants to plant in your garden and how to go about planting them. And if you just plant them, then the beneficial insects will come and they will help to manage the aphids and other pests in your garden. So you just have to be patient, whereas you could spray and kill the pests in one day. But if you let just the aphids live for a week or two, then it will give time for the ladybugs or the other beneficial insects to find your plants. And that's what these insectary plants do. They help speed up the process by giving the beneficial insects a permanent home in your garden, so you don't have to wait to find them. They can find you more easily. So that concludes my talk today, and I encourage you to complete our Qualtrics survey that I sent you with the webinar link, and keep posted for other gardening information and classes on our Garden Florida Facebook site. Also listed is my email and my office phone number, and so you can contact me. if you have any questions. And at this time, I will take questions. So I'm checking the chat box. If you have any questions, please let me know, okay? I have some people say thank you for the information. Great, thank you for coming today. And just go and buy, you know, all these plants or start them from seed. So we have a question from Amy. You mentioned insectary plants for deer, anything that helps for rabbits and squirrels. Well, I have found the plants that the deer do not eat, and so I plant those outside of my deer fence. So the plants that the deer love, I plant them inside of the deer fence. And so to keep rabbits and squirrels, you know, you might need a fence too. I know squirrels like to eat my tomatoes somehow, those pesky little buggers, and the rabbits will eat some new seeds popping up here and there. So just a little wire mesh fence around your area could help. Nothing really specific to help for the rabbits and squirrels though. I'll have to look more about that. So a question from John, what kind of insects do aquatic plants attract? Pickerelweed. So yeah, that will attract beneficial insects. I know the bees love the native pickerelweed. As far as the beneficial insects that will eat the aphids and things like that, I don't know specifically, but you know, it does attract beneficial insects, so we'll have to pay attention and see. Maybe there's a list somewhere online, but I'm not sure about that one. So next question, what mulch do you recommend for here in Florida? So we recommend an organic mulch. You can get free mulch from chipdrop.com, where they'll come and they'll drop a load. You can register to have a load dropped in your yard for free. If you go to the store and buy it, I recommend pine bark mulch. If you can find the tree trimmer down the street, you know, they can drop it in your yard too. Just any kind of organic mulch that will break down and turn back into soil is good. Okay. Let's see, flowering plants for shade. There is a type of passion vine, like the corky stem passion vine, that likes the shade. And I know that attracts the zebra longwing butterfly and others, the Gulf fritillary butterfly. For shade, let me think, some of the salvias do well in shade, like the red salvia. And then some of the asters also can take shade. So I hope that gave you some ideas. And you can also look in our Florida Friendly Landscaping Guide. You can download a free digital copy of it online. It's called the Florida Friendly Landscaping Guide to Plant Selection and Landscape Design. And they have little icons that say if it's for shade or for sun. So a question from Charlotte, is there anything specific that you use for caterpillars on squash? So the caterpillars on squash are a big problem. The parasitic wasps are the main beneficial insect that targets caterpillars, but you may need to do some additional control. I usually check my squash plants, you know, every couple days, and I'll examine them for caterpillars, and I'll just hand squish the caterpillars when I see them. And then if you have a lot of plants and you do need to resort to a control, like a chemical control, we recommend an organic control that contains BT, which is Bacillus thuringiensis, and that's available at, you know, box stores and nurseries, and so that's an organic control for caterpillars, but it will kill the good caterpillars as well as the bad caterpillars. So that's why I like to just check them and squish them. So Loretta asks, is it okay to introduce pickerelweed into a small lake that does not have any? And yes, that is fine. Pickerelweed is a native Florida plant and it is not invasive. It usually grows in nice small clumps, so that should not be a problem. All right, Cindy has a question about society garlic. Can it be planted in partial shade? And how wide does the plant get? Yes, it can be planted in partial shade. The plant stays pretty small. It might only grow to be 2 feet wide by 2 feet tall, minus the flower stalk, which shoots up to 3 plants. So planting them under a pindo palm. Also, there is a bush, a puffball bush. It gets high with pink fuzzy blossoms. Do you know how big it gets? Well, yeah, the puffball, that can get to, I don't know, 12, maybe 15 feet. A lot of people keep the powder puff bush kind of trimmed a little bit so it doesn't get too tall. But that all sounds good to me. Society garlic and a powder puff under your pindo palm tree. Great one. So are there any other questions? I'll take them now, and if not, then you can email me. And I would like to thank everybody for joining us today. And don't forget to do our survey on the way out. Okay, thank you everybody for joining, and stay tuned for the next webinar. We're teaching a webinar on fertilizer on Monday at noon, and there is a composting one Tuesday at 5:30 p.m., which are both listed on our Facebook page. So thank you for joining us, and have a great day, everybody.